Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. I have a little confession for you. I often, in my personality, I'm constantly straddling two different elements of my personality, and that is showing up for me right now as I speak. So it is 3:30. My children are about to come home from school, and there is part of me that's like, okay, I've got to get this episode recorded because they're going to be home soon, and then it's going to get noisy, and I've got to get all the things done. And so I have this drive to like, okay, I've got to get it done. And I'm so focused on that because I know I need to get it done by the end of today to get through to the editor and all of the things and the processes and X, Y, and Z. And part of that actually is because I know that I've made a commitment to doing this week of episodes for this podcast, and I need, we've all got our different little personality quirks to kind of get that, that validation. I need to like get approval because when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and there's that kind of part of my personality. And yet there's this other part of my personality that wants everything to be perfect. And so I am always having to work against that. And I know that I'm not alone in this because I was actually going over some comments that people made before they joined the Styling Masterclass. And I think that this is something that lots of people feel. And I just want you to listen to these and see if any of these sound familiar to you. So someone said to me, I've always had a passion for interiors and have procrastinated for years about turning what I love into a career. Now, these are not my words. These are somebody else's words who's joined the program, and I get everyone to share like what their challenges are and how I can help them. And so these are some of the things that have been coming up. I love design and love creating beautiful spaces, but get stuck in making decisions and knowing if it's the right decision, which then leads me to making no decisions. And then this third one that I just going to quickly share with you. I stand at an intersection in my life that compels me to choose a path to grow creatively and professionally so as to ensure the quality of life I wish to maintain as I age is possible. And so I'm sharing these because we often we come to this point where we have to make a decision. We have to make a decision about what course of action are we going to take. And so often we can live in the world of indecision when we get caught up in procrastination and perfectionism, which are kind of two sides of the same coin often. And there's a huge, huge impact of that in terms of what results that we can create in our lives and what kind of life we can live. And there's just these compounding effects of this. So I really want to look at this topic today because I actually don't think I've done this. And it is something that comes up a lot. And I know that I've struggled with this a lot myself. And I want to share with you what I've learned and what has helped me in the hope that it will help you as well. So I have in the past referenced Steven Pressfield with his book, The War of Art. And he shares so many different and really quite brilliant ideas about procrastination and how much it impacts us as creatives. And this is one of the things he said. The most pernicious aspect of procrastination is that it can become a habit. We don't just put off our lives today, we put them off till our deathbed. Whoa, I think that is so strong. This, particularly the idea that it becomes a habit and it becomes who we are. And we need to break that habit and we need to step into a different identity and we need to recognize our behavior and then step into a different type of behavior, create new habits that are going to be helpful. And I'm going to be sharing with you what has worked with me on this journey. I'm going to share a few more because I just think I really like the way that he just gets straight to the point with it. And it's, yeah, it's so important. So he says, procrastination is the most common manifestation of resistance because it's the easiest to rationalize. We don't tell ourselves, I'm never going to write my symphony. Instead, we say, I'm going to write my symphony. I'm just going to start tomorrow. And how many times have you done that? How many times have you said, I'm going to do it tomorrow, or I'm going to do it soon, or I'm going to do it next year? And it's always this time in the future. And you're kind of living your life in the future, but not actually realizing it or not actually making it happen. He also says the professional, because he talks about this idea a lot about, when we're creatives, we have to make this decision to go professional. He says, the professional has learned that success, like happiness, comes as a byproduct of work. The professional concentrates on the work and always rewards to come or not come, whatever they like, and allows rewards to come or not come, whatever they like. So it's really, you're always focused on the work. And otherwise, it's just, it's so easy to just get stuck. Okay, a final one. Are you paralyzed with fear? That's a good sign. Fear is good. Like self-doubt, fear is an indicator. Fear tells us what we have to do. Remember our rule of thumb. The more scared we are of a work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it. So good. So, like I said, it's so important to really understand and know the role that procrastination plays in our lives in terms of making decisions. And like I said, procrastination and perfectionism, they really are two sides of the same coin. Because if you are a perfectionist, often it's just a type of procrastination. And so I actually was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was about the difference between, it was about obsessive compulsive disorder. And it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. And I actually didn't realize the difference between OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And when I heard some things described, and it's so easy to like diagnose yourself, but pretty much everything out there these days. But I was like, oh my gosh, I don't, because sometimes I would say, oh, I have OCD tendencies, because I remember distinctly when I was a teenager and I would like rearrange the pantry so that all the labels were forward facing with the cans. And like, I liked everything to be in its place. And still to this day, like it just, with the shoes out that are lined up outside our front door, because we used to have a basket and then the snake started to live in the basket. So now we just line up our shoes neatly. And I'm just always like ordering them because I don't like when they're out of order. And I'm always trying to show my children, like my daughter threw her soccer boots there, and I brought her out this morning and said, do you notice what's happening with all the shoes? They're all lined up neatly and you've just thrown yours here. So please, put your shoes neatly. And because it makes my shoes dirty, if you just throw your soccer boots. And the same with my son. And anyway, and there are so many different elements of my life like that I had, we had a cleaner around the other day, and like we've got the ceramic dish that the soap sits in near the sink. And she sort of put it on an angle, and I just had to straighten it up. I just couldn't, I didn't like seeing it, on the angle. Like there are just little things like that it's always got to be a particular way. And it just makes me feel calm and at ease when things are ordered, and it just creates a sense of calm within me. Anyway, I share this just to say to you that, yes, I think that there are elements of this that are part of my personality. And I think we've all got different things like that. But I feel really fortunate that I've actually been able to use this element of my personality, this kind of like real eye for detail and kind of like noticing every single little detail and liking to create order in spaces and beauty in spaces. And I've been able to actually harness this particular, element of my personality into interior styling, which is all about how can you create beauty in spaces and how can you be really observant. And because so much of it is really about being super observant about spaces and noticing every single little detail, from like, the way that the fabric is moving on a blanket or cushion to the spacing between objects, to so many different things. So it's like it's like I found my calling. I mean, literally, through my personality, and it's kind of bringing these two different elements together. And look, I mean, there are stylists out there who are actually much more chaotic than me, and they can bring things together in a kind of chaotic but cohesive way. That is not my methodology at all in terms of styling. And that's kind of not what I teach, because, and I think that's why I have been able to teach styling, because I do like mentally break things down into processes and always have like these checklists and systems and all of these things, because it's not just chaos. Like there's a very much a method and a methodology to how I create anything. And, that is what I teach within the styling masterclass. And, that's what I teach within all of my programs, is like, I enjoy breaking things down into a process. And so anyway, that's been helpful for me. And sorry, I realize that this has been a little bit of a tangent, but I share this to let you know that, sometimes these quirks of our personalities can actually be really beneficial for certain careers or jobs or, things that we do in our lives. And secondly, to also share that, I have also had to learn what works well for me and what are some of the things that have been really helpful. So I think, first of all, I just want to start by sharing, let's take a look at what actually is procrastination. I'm going to have to slow down when I say that, because I try and say it too quickly and then I stumble on my words. So procrastination is delaying or postponing tasks. And we have to ask ourselves, why? Why are we doing this? Why are we delaying? Why are we postponing? And I think if we go back to that idea from Stephen Pressfield, it is often because of fear. Fear of putting ourselves out there, fear of getting it wrong, fear of it not being what, good enough, or not being what we want it to be. There are so many different ways that fear can show its face. And that is often related to procrastination, when we delay, when we're putting something off. Also, perfectionism is really often this idea of striving for like a flawlessness, and this often leads to delays, because it can never be, and this is sometimes where I catch myself, and I have to stop myself. Even this year with creating the content for and the curriculum for Design and Grow, like I have to stop myself, because I just like everything has got to be so right. And it's so important to me that everything is at such a high standard and experience and all of those things. And I really have to, I have to know and understand that about myself, because sometimes it's not necessarily, it's not always adding value to other people's experience, but it's like my own hangups within it, or even the back end of my business. And look, I do think this is important, but when we bring new people on, and if they're not doing it exactly the way that it's supposed to be, I have to catch myself, because it's important to understand that, like, quite honestly, I mean, it wouldn't be a very good business if everyone was like me and everyone had that level of perfectionism to the level that I can sometimes have it, because we would just get nothing done, or we would all be working crazy hours or whatever. So, it's not always healthy, and we need to enforce boundaries. And like I said, some of the common reasons we face this is this fear of failure or fear of criticism. And we can also, get this decision paralysis as a result, that we can't make a decision. And so if that's ever shown up for you, then that is often, can be an element of procrastination or perfectionism, that you just get completely paralyzed by the decisions that you make. And I think this is really interesting and important to take note of as well, that often these can come up when we've got a clear lack of goals or direction. And so just recording this podcast for you today, I think that one of the reasons I can overcome my perfectionism about it is because I've got a really clear goal, that I want to get this done so that I can get it to the editor by tomorrow so that we can get this whole series up and live. And I don't want to let anyone down. And like, I've got a really clear goal about it, about what's going to happen. And so I do know, and this has certainly been my experience, that when I have a really clear goal or focus for what I'm trying to achieve, and I also set myself a deadline, that helps me overcome any kind of procrastination or perfectionism. And so they are really important keys to understand. So I just want to also now just take a moment to really help you know and understand the hidden costs of procrastination, because it's really important to understand the impact that this is actually having on you and your life and your goals and your dreams. So we all know that time is a non-renewable resource. So once time is gone, we never get it back. So every time and every day and every week and every month and every year that we are putting something off, we never get that back. And so what happens is that over time, this has a compound effect. So let's just say, for instance, that let's just say you're an interior designer and you really want to start showing up more professionally on social media, getting more of the clients that you want to get, that you are really wanting. You've got these goals and these dreams for what you want your business to look like, the types of projects that you want to work on. So every day that we don't take action on those goals and those dreams, we are actually losing money and we're losing time as well. And over time, so let's just say that we didn't take action on something that we knew could help us with our goals. And so let's say that it becomes 3 months later and we still haven't taken action on that thing. It's on our to-do list. Oh yeah, I'm going to do that next month. Oh, I'll do that next year. And so what happens is that gap, that 3-month period where you didn't take action and you couldn't then start to see results, that is actually costing you money. So it's quite possible and probable that during that time, you might have got a couple of new clients and they might have been worth, let's just say, $5,000 each to you. So that has actually cost you $10,000 by not taking action. Do you see how that compounds over time? And then if you put it off a few more months, the same goes on and on. And if you leave it years, it can actually start to cost you. The kind of compound cost of not taking action can actually start to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when we delay, when we keep putting things off, when we keep, delaying taking action, it actually has a cost. Sure, the money is not coming out of our bank account, but what is happening is that we're not adding money to our bank account. We would have been adding that money, earning that money, and we're not. And the longer that we're not, then the more that it is costing us. And that delayed growth as well, it has other ramifications because, of course, any kind of journey, like there are different levels that you go through. And so maybe initially it's that, initially you might have improved the imagery on your social media or the imagery on your website. And then that would have had, a kind of a compounding effect in terms of like, oh, now I'm getting more followers or I'm getting more inquiries or whatever. And then over time, then you maybe get better clients. And then over time you get, maybe you start to build up a team. And then over time you need to sort of implement systems and all of these things. And, the process goes on. And it's like this compounding effect that if you don't even get started, you can't get onto that journey. And we can't as well expect things to happen instantly. And I think there's so much talk about like this instant success. But really what we need to do is we need to get on the journey. We need to start the journey because that's when we experience the growth. It's not at the end. It's not at the end of the journey we experience the growth. We experience growth along the journey. It's so important to know and remind ourselves of this. And so, there are so many kind of compound effects of when we do procrastinate. I mean, this can happen with people, and I've heard of people within my program, Design and Grow, talk about this, like not, spending time on doing invoicing and like that just becoming this bigger and bigger mountain and hurdle. And so then you missing deadlines and projects might get delayed. And, there's so many different compounding effects that can happen as a result of procrastination or perfectionism, where it's like, unless it's like, I'm doing it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. And that can have impacts as well. And so what happens then is that when we get into this mode of being, we increase our stress, our anxiety, and we start to lose confidence in ourselves and also motivation because it becomes a bigger hurdle to overcome. So we need to be really conscious of that as well in terms of what is happening and how to overcome that. So that relates to procrastination. Now, when it comes to perfectionism, it's really an illusion. And what happens is that perfectionism is essentially setting unrealistic expectations or standards for yourself. And they are not realistic. And so what that ends up happening is that you end up either not achieving what you want to because you're setting the hurdle too high for yourself. You're setting the bar too high. I mean, as I'm recording this, it's still Olympics, and I'm getting all the sporting analogies, but you get what I mean. And so we're setting the bar far too high for ourselves, and we can never reach it. We can never get there. And it can actually stifle creativity and innovation. And so things end up, we either don't start projects because we're setting, the bar too high, or things never get finished. And we say we're going to start something, but we don't finish it. And actually, this is something within, all of my programs, but the Styling Masterclass, I try and break it down into bite-sized pieces because I want people to finish it. It's so important that we finish what we start because that's where the growth comes. I mean, sometimes, there's like, I feel like a big chunk of people, I wish I had statistics on this, maybe I should do a study. But anyway, a big chunk of people can't get started. And then another big chunk of people, they get started, but they can't finish. So it's so important that we finish something. And this has been one of the greatest gifts of being, coming from a journalism background where I had deadlines and I didn't get paid unless I finished, unless I submitted my work. And similarly for my books, like I had to finish them. I've had so many different things in my life, in my career, where I've had to finish something. And it's such a good habit to be in. And, it's taught me so much in terms of getting over my perfectionism and getting over, any kind of procrastination that I might have, because I know that it's got to get finished. So that is obviously one of the huge opportunity costs of perfectionism, is that, we either never start or things get left unfinished, or we can miss out on opportunities because we're getting so stuck at a point where it's just not important. And that is holding us back as well. And the impact of this on our kind of well-being and mental health is that we can chronically feel dissatisfied in ourselves, dissatisfied in our work, in our lives. And often this creates like a feeling of burnout or just actual burnout, because pushing yourself so much to reach these impossible ideals. And it can really have an impact on your relationships as well. And it can make, other things challenging as well in your life, like, to be able to do collaborations perhaps, or, other opportunities that might come your way. So let's look at, how can we overcome procrastination and perfectionism? And of course, it sounds simple, but it's not always easy. And what we need to do is we need to embrace imperfection. And so for probably like at least 5 years now, if not longer, I have kind of had the mantra that done is better than perfect. And to really focus on that, it's got to be done. It has to be done. And look, I could have quite easily sat down and written an outline for this episode for about 5 hours, quite happily. But this episode needs to be done. So it is very much an exercise. And part of it kills me that, it's like, oh, I could have done this and like gone through all of these references and, research and all of these things. But, instead I'm going to share from the heart. And to me, I'm hoping that that is going to be helpful for you and sharing what has learned as well, what I've learned on my journey. And also in terms of embracing imperfection, to really appreciate this idea of progress over perfection. That as long as we're moving along that journey, we are making progress. And that is something to celebrate. And that is something that I am really getting better at doing, is celebrating the small wins every week. At the end of every week, I celebrate the wins. And I've even taken to writing in my notes as well, the wins that I'm experiencing personally and professionally every week, because I don't tend to do that. And it's really important to recognize your journey and the progress that you're making on your journey as well. Another tip is to really break down tasks into manageable steps. You can use techniques like the Pomodoro technique, which is, I'm pretty sure it's like 15 minutes. You set a timer for 15 or 20 minutes and do that. There are, so many different things that you can do in relation to that. What works really well for me is that at the start of every week, I write down all the things that I need to achieve, and then I prioritize them in my calendar. And so the most important things go into my calendar first, and I time block them. So I allocate 1 to 2 hours for different tasks. And then I know if those tasks get done, then that means that I'm making progress. That works really well for me. Also, it's really important to set realistic and achievable goals. So if you are perhaps trying to make something too, perfect, then scale it back. What can you do that's good enough, that's, progress over perfection? Again, within Design and Grow, this has been coming up, this idea of several people within the program are trying to create online courses. And I see this over and over again, that when people create online courses, they create this most amazing thing before they've even tested it. And so you've got to test first. You've got to sort of break it down into something that's manageable, test it before you go too crazy. And that idea can apply to so many different things, whether we're creating interiors, like, okay, let's break this process down into something that's manageable. Let's style this sideboard and see how we go. Let's see what we can learn from that before we try and style an entire house. And when we break it down into manageable steps, it feels much easier. That's why within the Styling Masterclass, I break down the assignments each week into simple ones. And I start off really small and we get bigger and bigger every single week so that, we can feel with it making that progress. And I love seeing how many people make it all the way through. And actually the last group that I had through was the best ever in terms of like really going all the way to the end. And it was so amazing to see. And part of that is this other point, which I'm going to actually skip to, which is accountability and support. So this idea of seeking mentors, joining creative communities, forming accountability groups, that is so important. And that is why I give feedback and I have the weekly Q&As within the Styling Masterclass, because that accountability helps keep making you make progress. And it's so easy to just kind of give up at the first hurdle. But when we are part of something that's holding us accountable, it's so much easier to make that progress. And that's why, I often share on this podcast or on Instagram ideas or things that I want to do, because that helps keep me accountable as well. Also, it's really important to develop a growth mindset, which is this idea developed by Carol Dweck. And, she's got actually a really brilliant TED Talk. If you haven't seen it, I'd really recommend you go and watch this. But really, celebrating the small wins and milestones, and really as well in relation to like a growth mindset, like really watch the language that you use in relation to yourself and your journey. And so, say things like, I'm learning to, style my spaces, or I'm learning how to elevate my interiors, or I'm getting better at, rather than like, I can't, or I'm no good at. So really watch the language that you use in relation to the way that you speak about yourself. And even in relation to perfectionism and procrastination, don't label yourself at that. Say, I'm overcoming perfectionism, or I'm getting better at, not being a perfectionist or whatever. So the point being that you don't want to just say, oh, I'm always procrastinating, because if you say that, you will live into that. So it's really important that we watch our language as well. So for me, one of the biggest, like I said, biggest helps has been not only setting boundaries in terms of my calendar and how I manage my time, but to really set deadlines for myself, and that I'm always doing that. I'm always setting deadlines that are manageable and that I can achieve what I want to achieve within that amount of time. I also think it is important to not overcommit. And one of my other little mantras is that if I put something on my plate, I need to take something off my plate. I was talking to a friend about this recently who she was doing something. She had this idea and it's all very exciting, but I said, look, you've got a lot going on at the moment. So just, please, for your own sake, if you're going to do this thing, then take something else off your plate at the moment, because it's a fast track to burnout. And that is something that I'm always saying to myself as well. And I think it's also important to just really check in with yourself and review your progress as well. And just see, like I said, celebrate those small wins and just take the time. I do this at the end of every quarter to not only look back every week, but every quarter and every year, and look back and see like, wow, like I did actually achieve some things. Because I think, again, when we kind of feel like, oh, I'm stuck in this way of being, then we just live into that. Whereas we can see, and it's important to see and recognize what we have achieved as well. So just to kind of recap, we've looked at the role that procrastination and perfectionism plays in creativity and how it can really hold us back, and how often it's related to a fear of failure or criticism, and the compound impact that this can have on our goals and our dreams and our lives. And, really to really not keep delaying decisions and waiting for things or conditions to be perfect before we take action. It's important that we're always taking action, that we recognize the journey that we're on and we're making progress on that journey, to really focus on progress over perfectionism, and remember that done is better than perfect. And like I said, for me, what has really worked is to really focus on like fewer goals, but then allocate them into my calendar so I know that I can get those things done. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. I actually share within the Styling Masterclass how I manage my time and my goals and all of those things. So if that is of interest, time is running out to join the program. I'll put a link in the show notes, nataliewalton.com/next level. Would love to help you achieve your goals if that is something that you have been on your heart and your mind. So would love to help you within there. And if not, whatever you are on your journey, like I said, just keep making progress. I will speak to you again tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me today. All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.